It's really important to, as we carry on our life's journey, not necessarily to think that we know better ourselves and that we can really draw upon other people, and that you get someone who can ask you the sorts of questions that you should be asking but aren't necessarily thinking about. And so that's I think it's just really good to lean in. We just need others. That's sort of the point of it all, that we need others if we're going to live well on the journey. Yeah, it's a great gift, really, to have people willing to put up with you that long. I mean, that in itself is a blessing. So, yeah, and they know you, they know your strengths, your weaknesses, and are there to encourage. And so, yeah, it's been a great gift. So, thanks. Yeah.
We're continuing in our Deuteronomy series, the Gospel according to Moses, and I kind of prodded Pastor Mark a little bit in these videos to give some, as he put it, unsolicited advice. I said, after 40 years, Mark, you deserve it. You get to speak your mind. And as we go through this series, the comparison, the similarities of Moses having walked with the people of Israel for 40 years, and Pastor Mark, who's been here over 40 years as pastor, and as he said in that video, upholding the relationships that are made and built and forged over that much time. It's a beautiful gift. So, and I can assure you that thank you was sincere to each and every person here. And so as we continue in this series, that's what our focus today will be in Deuteronomy chapter 4, the relationships, treasuring the relationship we have with God above all else. So verses 7 and 8, and then 32 through 40 of Deuteronomy chapter 4. What great nation is there that has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is to us whenever we call upon him? And what great nation is there that has statutes and rules so righteous as all this law that I set before you today? Then going on to verse 32, for ask now of the days that are past, which were before you, since the day that God created man on the earth, and ask from one end of heaven to the other, whether such a great thing has ever happened like this, or was ever heard of. Did any people ever hear the voice of a God speaking out of the midst of the fire as you've heard, and still live? Or has any God ever attempted to go and take a nation for himself from the midst of another nation, by trials, by signs, by wonders, and by war, by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, by great deeds of terrors, all of which the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your eyes? To you it was shown that you might know that the Lord is God. There is no other besides him. Out of heaven he let you hear his voice, that he might discipline you. And on earth he let you see his great fire, and you heard his words out of the midst of the fire. And because he loved your fathers, because he chose their offspring after them, and he brought you out of Egypt with his own presence by his great power, driving out before you nations greater and mightier than yourselves, to bring you in, to give you their land for inheritance, as it is this day. Know therefore today, and lay it to your heart, that the Lord is God in heaven above, and on the earth beneath. There is no other. Therefore, you shall keep his statutes and his commandments, which I command you today, that it may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may prolong your days in the land that the Lord your God is giving you for all time. Here ends our reading. In my 10 plus years of being a pastor, I've been in about 4 churches, and then I did an internship at another. And one of the hardest parts of all of it was having to say goodbye to the people when it was time to move on to my next call. And I look back and I remember picking out the texts for my final sermons and hoping really to communicate my whole heart to the people. I used Psalm 62 and Numbers chapter 6, and really trying to get across to the people what they meant to me and what my time meant, and hopefully to leave them with something spiritual, something from God. Yeah, as I sit with it now, I don't really remember anything I said in those final messages, What will they remember? Will they remember those those words that I put so much time into, so much effort into. Well, that's the thing about life, isn't it? We can easily forget. Like, we have those things that we want to remember, that we want to hold on to, maybe in a relationship or a memento from a former place we lived or whatever it is. And so often, like, the calendar comes around and we totally forget what happened, where we were, what we went through. And that's just kind of what it means to be human. It's easy to forget. And if anyone displays how easy it is to forget, it is the people of God in the Old Testament. You look at what happens when God sends Moses to bring the people out of slavery in Egypt in the book of Exodus, and then as he leads them through the wilderness, like they're continually forgetting all that God has done. I mean, God brought them out of slavery, used these 10 plagues, these 10 powerful miracles to bring them through. He walked them through the Red Sea on dry land. He leads them through the wilderness, provides them bread every single day, and blows pheasants into their camp so they have meat to eat, all this stuff. But yet still, you find them grumbling and hoping for something else and turning away to other gods. Like, they were so quick to forget. In this book of Deuteronomy, Moses, after 40 years of walking with these people, he's got one last attempt. One last sermon, and that's what the book of Deuteronomy is. 3 hours of sermon. If you read it out loud, 3 hours. Yeah. So I got 40 verses to preach on today. I don't think I'll go that long. We'll see. These people, he was so worried they would forget. Remember who God is. Remember the relationship he's established with you. That's what he says here in in Deuteronomy chapter 4. But before we go there, I want to talk a little bit about this whole gospel according to Moses. Because sometimes when we think about the Bible, it's like we got the Old Testament and we got the New Testament. The Old Testament is full of all those weird laws and all that kind of stuff. And the New Testament is full of the gospel. It's full of grace and goodness. The God of the Old Testament, mean, bad, harsh, doing all sorts of crazy things. God of the New Testament, good, loving, kind, loves everyone. And I don't know. When you open up the Bible, it doesn't always feel that way. Like you go to like the words of Jesus. If you really sit with the words of Jesus, like go and he says, like, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out, because it's better to enter the kingdom of heaven with only one eye than to perish the other way. He's like, if your right hand causes you to sin, just cut it off. It's like, these are not easy words, are they? He actually says some pretty terrifying things. He's like, I don't know you. You call me Lord, Lord, but I don't know you. Okay. And then in the Old Testament, we find words of grace, words of gospel. It's not so cut and dry as the Old Testament is the law and the New Testament is gospel. No, the law is God trying to make clear the way that he has for us. And so often when we look at it, we realize how far we've fallen, how far we haven't made it. And the gospel is God's promise to us that despite our failures, despite our weakness, despite our flaws, he will rescue us. And he made that crystal clear in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, but it's there written in every page of Scripture and here in Deuteronomy chapter 4 as well. Hebrews chapter 3 unpacks a little bit about this distinction between Moses and Jesus as it relates to the Old Testament and the New Testament. It says this. I was actually going to go to John 1. I forgot about that. Yeah, John chapter 1 also highlights this. It says, the law came through Moses. If you want to go back a slide, that's my bad, sorry. The law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And so as we think about this, now we'll go to Hebrews chapter 3. The writer of Hebrews, he pictures it this way for us, as like a house being built. And he says, Moses was faithful in all God's house. But for Jesus has been counted more worthy of glory than Moses, as much more glory as the builder of a house has, more honor than the house itself. So he says Moses was faithful in all of God's house as a servant to testify to the things that were to be spoken. The servant brought the law. Here's the rules we got to follow. The servant brought the law. Moses was faithful and delivering that to the people of God. But Jesus came not as a slave, it says. Christ is faithful over God's house as a son. The servant helps to build the house. The son dwells in the house. And then he ends by saying this, we are the house. We are the house that Moses has been working to build. We are the house that Jesus desires to dwell in. Our hearts are to be his home. This is the law and the gospel held together right here. In Moses, in his words, in Jesus, ultimately, the Son of God who wants to dwell in us. So what does Moses have to say about a healthy relationship, about the relationship we have with God, and what can we learn about that today? The first thing is that God desires a healthy relationship with us. We can use words like righteous, that's kind of a church word, just, statutes and commandments and all this stuff. Ultimately, I think we can boil it down to God wants a healthy relationship with us. In Deuteronomy 4, verses 7 and 8, it says this, what great nation is there that has a God so near to them, as the Lord our God is to us, whenever we call upon him? It said, what great nation is there that has the statutes and rules so righteous as this law that I set before you today? Right, so those two things there, the God being near and the laws being righteous, stood in direct contradiction to all the other ways of the world at that time. Everyone thought they got to work their way to God. They got to go up on that high mountain and make the sacrifice or participate in like some dark, corrupt, twisted rituals to please the God, appease the God, and maybe make the God look on them with favor or kindness. They couldn't rely on a God who was faithful, righteous, always consistent. No, to them, the gods were arbitrary. Gods were arbitrary. It's kind of like diets today, isn't it? Like, you go back like 10 years and all you're supposed to eat is like fruits and vegetables. But you go back like 10 years before that, and then there's like, you just eat meat and you'll be good. And nowadays, it's just like, take a pill and everything will be fine, Trying to figure out how to eat these days can be pretty hard. Whose advice do we follow? God, he's not arbitrary. He doesn't change like the latest news or the latest health fad. No, God is not arbitrary. And his ways, he's made them clear to us. And if we look at all the laws in the Old Testament, he was trying to make it clear that he desired health in all relationships. Actually, these two commandments, Jesus says they're the two great commandments of the Old Testament. They're both found in the words of Moses. The one is in Deuteronomy, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And the other one is in the book of Leviticus, the book of all these rules. In the midst of all these rules, buried in there is this nugget, love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. This is the law that God has given, a law of love. And you look at what these two laws have done for society. Even nations who are far away from God or Jesus, so much of civilization is built on the laws, the righteous laws that God established 3,500 years ago with his people to set a different course, to chart a different way. God was near to his people, and God gave them a healthy way of living. We have a healthy way of living. As we read the scriptures, God desires not only us to be healthy people, but for us to have a healthy relationship to God. He's not arbitrary. He's told us exactly how we can rely on him. And he's leading us in his way. And this is the thing about God's word. Deuteronomy chapter 30, we're going to skip a slide, sorry about that. Deuteronomy 30, it says this. This commandment, Moses said, that I command you today, it's not too hard for you. It's not far away. It's not in heaven that you should say, who's going to ascend to heaven for us and bring this word to us that we might hear it and do it? No, it's not beyond the sea either that you should say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us? No, the word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart so that you can do it. God desires his people to be close. He didn't give them an image or a form. He didn't appear in any sort of mystical way. He gave them words. In the New Testament, the Word made flesh, Jesus Christ, right? But in the Old Testament, he gave them words. He spoke to them from the cloud. You have the Word. You have health right there. But not only did God want to leave his people with his words, he desires an intimate relationship with his people too. That's what Deuteronomy makes clear. Verses 32 to 33, Moses is talking to the people, and he basically says this: has any nation experienced what you've experienced? Has anyone gone through what you've gone through? Has anyone gotten an experience with the divine like you've had? It ends there. Did any people ever hear the voice of a God speaking out of the midst of the fire as you have heard and still live? Has anyone had this experience, this intimate experience of God like you are today? The actions of God demonstrate his intense desire for his people. In fact, when he tries to define himself in the Ten Commandments, he goes to that, his intense desire for his people. And he says it in Deuteronomy 4, verses 23 to 24. He says that the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. You're like, I tell my kids not to be jealous. I thought we weren't supposed to be jealous of things. Well, yeah, you're not supposed to be jealous of other people's things. But you should intensely desire those things that are yours. Like a husband and a wife. Like a parent and a child. Like God and his people. That he has an intense devotion, a deep affection for you, and a fierce intolerance of rivals trying to take your heart. And he said, be careful. There's going to be all sorts of things that want to make their way into your hearts, into your lives. Don't let them. Don't let all these other gods and all these other religions that might make you feel good or seem easy in the moment. Because all those religions of that time, they were transactional. If I do this God will be pleased with me, and then I'll get what I want. If I do this, then God will be pleased with me, and he'll give me what I want. Our God is not transactional. He's fiercely loyal, intensely personal, and he desires an intimate relationship with us. And anything that is trying to pull away from him, it says he's a consuming fire. The jealous God, the one who burns with love for us. And it's his love that stokes the fire. It's not his hate. It's his love that stokes the fire. And later on, or in another part of Deuteronomy 4, it talks about how Egypt was a fiery furnace, an iron furnace where gold is melted, where all the impurities are burned away. And if Egypt was the furnace, God is the fire. So when things go south in our lives, when we turn aside and we find ourselves tempted, and maybe not only tempted, but give in to those temptations, when we find ourselves in the midst of things we never thought we'd be doing, things we never thought we'd be saying, things we never thought we'd be feeling. In the midst of that, God is burning away all that is unholy. God is burning away all things that are dragging our hearts in other directions. That's what it means when he says he's the jealous God, the all-consuming fire. That he will let nothing hold us back from an intimate relationship with him. He will do what it takes. And the thing about God is we hold together this image of him as the all-consuming fire right next to just a few verses later in Deuteronomy 4. Moses says this about God: the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will not leave you. He will not destroy you. He will not forget the covenant with your fathers that he swore to them. These two things hold together. Almost like in John chapter 1 when it says grace and truth. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. This message of who God has always been for his people. The one who will fight for you. The one who will claim you as his own. The one who will lead the people of Egypt, or the people of Israel, through slavery, through affliction, through desert wanderings, through turning away, all these things to get them right here, ready walk into the promised land that he's given them. Our God is not transactional. We can't pay him back for what he's done for us. We can't change his mind when we try to make some nice promise to him. God, if I do this, will you do that? I promise I'll go to church. I'll read my Bible. I'll be nice to that person. If you can just... God's like, that's silly. I want your heart. I want you. None of that other stuff really matters, does it? God proved to Israel that even though all that stuff didn't matter, he'd still give it to them. He still blessed them with a land and a home and property and children and a beautiful life. But it wasn't about those things. It was about their hearts being one with him. Because it wasn't just slavery that kept the people of Israel from God. Sure, in slavery, they cried out, it says in the beginning of Exodus, God saw and God knew their pain. But they left Egypt, and in Deuteronomy 4, 35 to 36, it says this, all the miracles, all the amazing things you saw, to you it was shown that you might know that the Lord is God. And it says this, there is no other besides him. And out of heaven he let you hear his voice that he might discipline you. He might discipline you. That caught me off guard when I was reading that. Of all the things to say there, right? It's like, he let you hear his voice because he loves you. He let you hear his voice to know that he's there with you. He let you hear his voice to know how much he cares. No, he let you hear his voice that he might discipline you. What's behind that? Well, actually, the Lord is a consuming fire. The Lord is a merciful God who will never leave you or forsake you. These things are also picked up in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12 and 13. And there in chapter 12, it also talks about the Lord's discipline. It says, as a father disciplines the child he loves, so the Lord disciplines you. The Lord holds us accountable, because that's what it means to be close. If you don't want closeness with your kids, don't confront them. If you don't care about them, then let them do what they want, right? If you care, you'll confront. If you love, you'll discipline. And that's what God is saying about us. He let us hear his voice so that we might be pulled out from the transactional way we want to see God to see the God who's very near to us, the God who walks with us, who wants to dwell in our hearts, the God who would give himself ultimately for us. That's the third place I want to go here if you're following along in the sermon outline or whatnot. God's power and presence are to protect our relationship with him. God's power and presence are to protect us. So look at Deuteronomy 4, verse 37. God says, because he loved your forefathers, because he chose their offspring after them, he chose you. He brought you out of Egypt with his own presence, by his own great power, his presence, his power for you to bring you to freedom. And it says here he chose them, and that's one of the big themes throughout the Old Testament. God chose the people of Israel. And remember who he chose. Abraham was 75 years old, no kids, no home of his own, still living in his father's house. And God came to him and said, I choose you. I choose you to be my chosen people. And your children are going to be as numerous as the sand on the shore, numerous as the stars in the sky. And Abraham's like, well, my children don't exist, so. No, but God, and that's why we baptize babies. Now, everyone is welcome to baptism because God is working in our lives and he's choosing us and he's working at different stages and different times in all of our lives, but we baptize babies to demonstrate that God has chosen us, that God has claimed us as his own. And even in that cute little phase when we can't choose anything, we know that God is the one who's made us to be his. God has chosen us. And what Moses points out to the people of God is that God has brought you through the land of Egypt. Look at all the crazy things he did. He brought you through the wilderness. He did all this stuff by his presence, by his great power. And Egypt represented the land of slavery. And the slavery was not just bonds. It was not just somebody telling us what to do every minute of every day. No, the slavery that we experience in our lives, it goes deeper. There's spiritual darkness. There's ultimately, all of us are bound by death. We're all enslaved to dying. And Jesus came to set us free. John chapter 8, he says, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin, but whoever the Son sets free will be free indeed. Jesus came to set us free from all evil, from all the powers of death. And in John chapter 12, as he's talking to the people of God, preparing them for his crucifixion, because they don't get it. They don't understand what he's trying to do. And he says, hey, my soul is troubled. This is a hard thing, but what am I going to do? Say, Father, save me from this hour? He's like, no, I came for this very hour. I came to go through the cross, to go through the pain, to go through the rejection and the humiliation. I came to go through it all to set you free from it. He says, Father, glorify your name. And a voice speaks from heaven, just like it did in the time of Moses. And it says, I have glorified it in Egypt. I have glorified it in the wilderness. And I will glorify it again in the death of Christ on the cross. And Jesus answered, he said, this voice has come for your sake, not mine. He said, now is the judgment of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out. And I, when I'm lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. Jesus declared that Satan was defeated by his death on the cross. Jesus was stating that death was defeated in his death on the cross. And his resurrection proved his power over all things. We haven't just been set free from a nation. We haven't been set free from just slavery. We've been set free from death itself in the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. His power, his presence for us. And just as these people, right, in Deuteronomy, they're standing like waiting to enter the promised land for when this sermon will finally be over and they can finally go in. Oh, maybe they weren't waiting for the sermon to be over. As they're standing there waiting, they're looking in at this land that God has promised to them. We're there too, right? Not yet having received resurrection life. Still having to go through suffering, struggle, and death. But we can look back at our lives. I think probably all of us have gone through something pretty hard. Maybe the loss of a loved one, maybe a tough job situation, maybe personal health struggles. And as we go through those challenges, as we wrestle with our own weakness, as we wrestle with our own inability to get ourselves through this, God came through, didn't he? But we're sitting here today on the other side of that pain, on the other side of that struggle. We're sitting here today because God has seen us through it. And we can look back and we can see what God has led us through. And that can anchor us as we look forward too. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 39. As Moses wraps up this section, he says this, "Know therefore today and return to your heart." Return to your heart. Focus inward on that place where God is meant to dwell. You know, as I think back to those sermons I preached and have long since forgot, no matter the words, we remember relationships, don't we? No matter the words, we remember relationships. Many of you probably remember Pastor Mark, being there for you in the midst of difficult times, or Pastor David or other pastors here at Peace. We remember the relationships, and I think back to New York and Joanne. She would call me tall, dude. I don't think I'm that tall, but she was that short, I guess. And Joe, who was sitting there on Saturday nights in the very back pew, having a great time. I'd go visit his wife and take her communion in her home. I remember Bruce and Jeannie always making sure there was coffee and enough donuts, and Heather and Paul and Lori and Scott, and the relationships that we had. Remember the relationship. Remember what God has done, and know that God will bring you through whatever you're going through. Whatever you're struggling with today, it can feel overwhelming. It can feel like you're lost, like you're out of control, and maybe you are out of control. Like if you could just trade something in or whatever you could. No, you have a God who loves you. You have a God who can do anything. You have a God who's paved a way through death itself. He will see you through this because he loves you. And we treasure that relationship above all else. Amen. As we come now to a time of prayer, I want you to remember, I want you to return to your heart. Take some time to dwell on what God has brought you through and use that to anchor us as we look forward to what God has for us too.